We could be forgiven for just deciding to bet on who's going to get popped for roids in the UFC next week instead of the upcoming fight night card this weekend. But we're going to bet on the fights instead. Although I do have a couple of ideas who might get popped, but it might be a bit slanderous to say those things in a podcast, so I'll keep it to myself. Instead, we're going to look at the next UFC fight night on Saturday night. Ben Henderson versus Brandon Thatch. Quite an interesting matchup that is. That's the headline fight, the main event. But let us start at the Carnival with Nick Lintz, and he is fighting a man called Levin Makashvili, who must be Georgian with a name like that. Says he's fighting out of New York, but I know you're Georgian, Makashvili. I know it's some distant relative of Stalin is what you are. But anyway, Makashvili, I mean, to be honest, your first fight in the UFC, probably you don't want it to be against Nick Lintz. Nick Lentz he's a good fighter. He's going to grind you into dust in a unanimous decision. That's the only thing I can see happening here. Makashvili, it's his first fight in the UFC, like I said. He has only 7 fights in his record. He's 6-1. He's got a few knockouts, a few decisions, no subs, anything like that. I can't see how a guy with 7 fights can come in to the UFC and fight Nick Lintz and win at featherweight. I just don't see it. Lintz, who, had a little bit of trouble at lightweight. He's not the biggest guy, but moving down to featherweight at 5'8", that suits him a lot better. And, he beat Manny Gambiorni in that decision. That's not that difficult a thing to do, but he lost to Chad Mendes. That was his big run where he beat Hakon Diaz Nunez and Mitsuoka, but then he lost to Mendes. It set him back, and he wants a good win on Saturday, Lintz, and he's going to get it. The bookies obviously heavily favour him, but, 9 times out of 10, Lintz is winning this fight by decision. So lock that bet in. Okay, and move on to Efren Esquerdo. Hecho on Mexico. That's what he calls himself. I'm not sure what hecho means, but anyway, Esquerdo, if anybody was a journeyman fighter or a jobber, as Conor would like to call him, this man is it. He's been cut twice from the UFC. I remember him beating Philippe Nover in the Ultimate Fighter finale. This would have been Ultimate Fighter 7 or 8. And then he beat Cole Miller, knocked him out, which was quite interesting. But then he lost to Evan Dunham, beat Dan Lawson, lost to Charles Oliveira, got cut, went off to the regional circuit, won 3 fights. Won a couple more fights, went into Bellator, won a fight, comes back to the UFC, boom! Unanimous decision, lost to Jacob Volkman and Matt Danzig, the recently retired Matt Danzig. And then he went in the regional, he lost to Griffin and Patino, 4 fights in a row he lost. Then he had 3 wins, and he got back to the UFC to fight Leonard Santos in his big return for the 3rd time to the UFC. Unanimous decision, lost. So Efren Esquerdo is not a man that I have any sort of confidence in to win. Now, he's fighting a guy called Monstro Goiano Rodrigo de Lima from Macapá in Brazil. The guy's only 23 and he's a submission specialist. He has 2 losses on his record, and he's a good few submission wins on his record. 3, 4, 5, 6 wins by submission. And he got knocked out in his last fight by Neil Manny in the 2nd round by KO. Surprising there, but it happened. Neil Manny is a lot better a fighter than Efren Esquerdo, put it that way. And I think my bet is actually on Monstro to submit Esquerdo. Esquerdo's lost a couple of fights by submission in his past. He's lost a lot of fights by a lot of ways, but he's lost a couple of fights by submission. And maybe he might be too experienced and too canny for this young Brazilian. But I think the Brazilian's going to be fired up. He lost his first fight in the UFC, and he wants to make up for that. And he's going to come guns blazing for Esquerdo. He's going to try and get his back, and he's going to try and sink in a rear naked choke. And I think he's going to get it. That's what I think. It's a close fight in the bookies, but I'm going with Monstro. If you want to pick him by submission, I suggest you do that too. Okay, now Daniel Kelly is fighting Patrick Walsh, Fat Pat Walsh. Now Daniel Kelly is 8-0. 7 of those wins, 6 of those, 5 of those wins were by submission. And interesting, I'm just looking at his first win here. TKO thrown from the ring. So he obviously picked up a guy and threw him out of the ring in his first fight. I like your style. I like your style, Daniel Kelly from Melbourne, Australia. But recently he's done a lot of submissions. He's got a good few rear naked chokes. He won his debut in the UFC against Luke Zacharich by Kimura in the first round. Now normally these guys, he's been on the Australian circuit for his first 8 fights, submitting kangaroos. So when you get to the UFC and a higher level of competition, you find often these submission specialists and submission phenoms can't lock in the sub against higher competition. But he did it in his first fight in the UFC in the first round by Kimura. Now that is impressive. That's some damn impressive stuff. He's got a knockout in his record as well. So obviously the guy has a little bit of power. Now he's fighting Fat Pat. Fat Pat you might remember from one of the Tough 374 I think it was last year. And Pat threw big looping haymaking punches, had no skills on his feet. Power, and he can, if you stand there looking at him, he'll hit you in the face and put you down. But Fat Pat was known for his wrestling and his top control and his aggression, his heart and his balls to the wall style. And Fat Pat would walk through a wall of fire to win a fight. We know that. And he's got a couple of wins on his record recently. He won his last 2 fights. Daniel Spone beat in the Ultimate Fighter finale. That's 6, 7, 8 months ago. And he's lost by rear naked choke before. Telling. That's pretty telling. He lost by rear naked choke after 18 seconds of a fight. So I'm going with Daniel Kelly. And the interesting thing here is the bookies have Fat Pat as big favourite. They obviously think he's going to take Daniel down, smother him, and just dominate for a decision. But I think Daniel Kelly is going to surprise a few people with a bit of Barbie Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's going to get a submission on Fat Pat. I don't know what round it's going to be, but he's going to do it. And even if Pat gets a takedown, Kelly's very dangerous from the bottom. So, one way or another, he's getting a sub, and he's the underdog, so that's a big, nice, juicy bet. Daniel Kelly by submission. Alright, I think this is another intriguing fight, more so because of the bookmakers' odds. Kichi Kurimoto, Strasser they call him, is fighting Neil Manny. Neil Manny is getting well known because he fought 5 times last year, and he won all the fights, which quickly brushes over the fights he lost the year before when he faced stiffer competition. But Manny is big favourite for this fight. Why? I don't know. I wouldn't have him big favourite. He's fighting a guy, an experienced guy, 33 years old, who has won his last 7 fights, and he's won 3 in a row in the UFC. Yet Manny is big favourite. Why? Do they think they're going to knock out this Japanese guy? I don't think he's going to get knocked out. If I look at his record, I see a single knockout in his record, which is his first fight in 2006, where he got knocked out by head kick after 5 seconds. That was not fun for Kichi Kurimoto, but it was a long time ago, 9 years ago. In his last couple of years, since 2012, he's gone on a 7-fight streak, and as I said, 3 of those in the UFC. He's a submission specialist. This guy works like a dream on the ground. If he gets your back, you're done. Daniel Sarafian knows all about that. He's got arm bars, he's got triangle chokes, he's got all sorts of different types of ways to finish a fight. And he's got a little bit of power. He's won a couple of fights by KO, so he's got that as well. He's won a few fights by decision. Now, probably most people are thinking, yeah, man, he's going to win this by decision. He's going to dance around, plip and plop, and stick out his jab and his nice kicks and be quick. And Kurimoto's going to probably try and go for a takedown. He might not get it. But I think at some point Kurimoto's going to get his takedown and he's going to get like the old boa constrictor on Manu's back, and I think he's going to lock in a submission. And if I take a look at Neil Manu, we see, triangle choke submission, guillotine choke submission. You know, one of those was in UFC 163 in 2013, so he's not all that immune, let's say, to being submitted. And I think you're going to get 10-1 on Kunimoto. So as a side bet alone, I recommend putting $5, $10 on that, because I think it's brilliant odds for a very good fighter who's 7-0, three fights in the UFC. How is he such a big underdog? Doesn't make sense. Bookies, you're going to get stung on this. Kichi Kunimoto, lock him in to win by submission. That's what I say. All right, Cole Magrinho Miller. So Cole is calling himself, he's got a Brazilian nickname for himself, and he's fighting out of American top team in Augusta, Georgia. Makes sense, Cole. Makes a lot of sense. Anyway, let's not be too hard on Cole. He's got a good submission game, and he managed a unanimous decision against Andy Ogle. So, you know, he's obviously going places. But, you know, the last impressive win he had is against Ross Pearson. But we're going all the way back to 2010, and Ross was dumb and stupid and really didn't know what he was doing. And he's only slightly less so now, but he's still a pretty decent fighter. And he subbed him by rear naked choke, and he had beaten Dan Loazon. And he had also subbed George Gurgel and Junie Browning, but, you know, no great shakes, either of those guys. But then, you know, we look at his record, and he lost to Seiler, he lost to Nam Phan, he lost to handsome Matt Wyman, decision, split decision, lost a decision to Manny Gamburian. How do you lose a decision to Manny Gamburian? You either beat Manny Gamburian or he catches you with something lucky. So, okay, you know, Miller's beaten Sam Sicilia in his last fight with rear naked choke. Sam Sicilia is a pretty one-dimensional fighter. Half decent, you know, he actually won me some money a couple of weeks ago. But this time Cole Miller's fighting Max Holloway. Now, Max Blessed Holloway, he got kind of embarrassed a bit by Conor, and people wrote him off as, he's just shit. And I've seen some newspaper guys writing about Conor's previous opponents and saying Max Holloway was rubbish and untested and a kid. And Max Holloway is a very good fighter. And okay, he knocked out Akira Corsani in his last fight, and my granny could probably knock out Akira if she was still alive with some sort of wrinkle kick. But he's won 4 in a row since his loss to Conor. They've been impressive. He's knocked out 3 and submitted 1. And his only previous loss in the UFC before that, actually 3 losses in the UFC. His first fight was 2012. He was very young. He lost to Dustin Poirier by submission. And we give him a buy on that. But then he went and beat Pat Schilling, Justin Lawrence, and Leonard Garcia. You know, a young kid beating those 3 guys, impressive. He lost a split decision to Bermudez. And Bermudez with all this hype about him. He got the shit kicked out of him in his last fight. But then he lost to Conor by unanimous decision. He's just not on Conor's level. But nobody is, let's be honest. But Max is going to knock out Cole Miller. Cole Miller is going to... He's going to come in there angry and all tough and thinking, I'm tough, but I'm going to smite this motherfucker. But at the end of the day, Holloway is going to knock you around the ring, Cole. You're going to pull guard at some point, I reckon. But either way, he's going to knock you around the ring. He's going to kick you against the cage. He's going to hurt you. He's going to get you down. He's going to finish you with ground and pound with Cole Miller. We might even see Cole Miller tap to strikes. You know, haven't seen that in a while, but... we might see. But I think Max Holloway is gonna win by KO. And that is a good bet for me. And one I'm definitely locking in. Lastly, we come to the main event of the evening. We got this guy, Brandon Thatch. Ruckus, he calls himself. 6'2", fighting in the welterweight division. How did these dudes make that weight at 6'2" and being a fresh fighter? I don't know. Ask Gleison Tebow. Someone asked him this morning and said it's due to diuretics. And if the whole platoon is in fact on roids, maybe Brandon Thatch likes an old diuretic now and again. But let's not tar him with the brush of everybody else at the moment. He's fighting Benson Henderson. Benson Henderson moving up to welterweight. That is quite the interesting story too. Benson, he's a victim of Anthony Pettis, really, because he lost to Pettis, but then he wanted a rematch. He fought 2 guys, and he won. And he should have had a rematch, but Pettis was, getting his nails done in a salon for a year and a half, so he couldn't fight. And then he fought, so Henderson went and fought Raphael and got knocked out, and then he took another fight with Cowboy and he got beaten. Very tight decision. I think he lost the fight, but a very tight decision. So Henderson's thinking now, he's thinking, I want gold around my waist, and I'm quite a way away from it in the lightweight division. So he's moved back up to welterweight. He's tired of cutting weight. You ever seen the size of Henderson's legs? They are like 2 trucks. And I think they're going to be pretty big for this fight. And people are saying, they're saying Brandon Thatch, he's too big. He's going to be too big for Henderson. He's going to be too strong for him. Brandon Thatch ain't fought shit. He fought Paulo Thiago. The last time Paulo Thiago won a fight, The Wizard of Oz was top film at the box office. You know what I mean? Paulo Thiago does not win fights. He goes out on the streets of Brazil and he fights drug dealers with SWAT teams. And then in his spare time, he gets into the ring as a token gesture to the UFC because he doesn't win. I think he's won 1-6, Paulo Thiago. And before that, Thatch beat Justin Edwards, another, world-class fighter. Hell no. How is Brandon Thatch almost level with Benson Henderson for this fight in the bookies' minds? It's just crazy talk, crazy talk. Because he's bigger and stronger. No, you don't beat Paulo Thiago and then get evens or close to evens against Ben Henderson. Ben Henderson's going to win this fight. He's going to be smarter and better than Thatch. And Thatch hasn't fought in a while, November 9, 2013. So he's almost a year and a half out of action. Henderson is warmed up. There's no ring rust. And I don't think he's going to do something stupid and get knocked out. We saw how good he is against Cowboy. Cowboy's top of his game. And Henderson almost took that fight from him. Brandon Thatch is not winning this fight. How's Henderson going to win it? Well, you would be thinking he's going to win it by decision. If it was 3 rounds, it would be a decision all day long. But it's 5 rounds. So, I'm going to put this in my accumulator just as a win for Henderson. Because it's pretty tough to pick. I mean, I don't know if Thatch can handle 2-3 rounds of Henderson. How hard Henderson will go after him if he wants to finish or he just wants to get a win. I don't think Henderson's going to be going for the finish. But we don't know how tough Thatch is. But Henderson's going to win either way, so just lock that in. Now, the interesting thing is I had a quick look at a couple of accumulators for my picks. And because I'm going with a couple of underdogs, i.e. Kunimoto and Kelly, you pick an accumulator tonight with what I've just told you, and a $5 bet's going to win you $4,000 on most of the websites I've checked. And that ain't half bad. And if you do put that bet in, and if you do win, I will be accepting thank you gifts at a secret address, which will be provided later. But overall, we don't have the most exciting card. We could be putting bets on Rumble or Big Rig and their diet of whatever, but we're not. We're going to leave that for a future announcement. And we're going to look forward to winning some money this weekend. I wish you luck, and I will be in touch.